What if I told you that right now, at this very moment, there's a 50-50 chance that a microscopic parasite is living inside your brain, subtly influencing your personality, your decision-making, and even your likelihood of getting into a car accident. And what's even more terrifying is that you'd have absolutely no idea it's there. This isn't science fiction. This is Toxoplasma gondii, and it might be the most successful moment. There's a 50-50 chance that by the end of this video, you'll never look at your cat the same way again. Did you know that nearly 1/3 of the entire human population is infected the same way again? That's over 2.5 billion people walking around right now with a tiny organism manipulating their neural pathways. In some countries, the infection rate is as high as 95%. But here's where it gets really crazy. This parasite didn't evolve to infect 95%. Its primary target? Rats and mice. Humans are just collateral damage in one of and disturbing survival strategies. So how does a rat parasite end up controlling human behavior? So how does rats actually attracted to cat urine? And what does this have to do with increased risk-taking, slower reaction times, and even links to schizophrenia? Let's dive into the bizarre world of Toxoplasma gondii. To understand how insidious this parasite really is, we need to understand its life cycle, which reads like a horror movie script written by a biologist. Toxoplasma gondii can only sexually reproduce in one place, the intestines of cats. That's right, domestic cats, wild cats, any feline will do. When a cat is infected, the parasite reproduces and releases millions of microscopic eggs called oocysts in the cat's feces. A single cat can shed 500 million of these oocysts in just 2 weeks. These oocysts are incredibly resilient. They can survive in soil, water, and the environment for over a year, waiting patiently for their next host. And here's where the nightmare begins. When a rat or mouse comes into contact with these oocysts, maybe by foraging through contaminated soil or eating contaminated food, they become infected. The parasite travels through the rodent's bloodstream and eventually makes its way to the brain. And this is where Toxoplasma reveals its true genius. The parasite doesn't just live passively in the rat's brain, it actively rewires it. Infected rats lose their natural, evolutionary fear of cat urine. In fact, they become attracted to it. Imagine that. The smell that should send them running for their lives now draws them closer like a moth to a flame. This is biological manipulation at its finest. The parasite needs to get back inside a cat to complete its reproductive cycle, so it literally changes the rat's brain to make it suicidal. The infected rat wanders toward the scent of its predator, gets eaten by a cat, and boom, the parasite is exactly where it wants to be, ready to reproduce and start the cycle all over again. Now you might be thinking, okay, that's terrifying for rats, but I'm not a rat. How does this affect me? Well, humans can become infected in several ways. The most common route is through contact with cat feces, usually while cleaning litter boxes or gardening in contaminated soil. But you can also get it from eating undercooked meat, particularly pork, lamb, or venison, because livestock can also be infected. Unwashed vegetables and contaminated water are other routes of transmission. Pregnant women are especially warned about toxoplasmosis because the parasite can cross the placental barrier and cause serious birth defects. Once inside a human, Toxoplasma follows a similar path. It enters cells, multiplies, and eventually forms cysts, particularly in muscle tissue and the brain. These cysts can remain dormant for decades, potentially for your entire lifetime. For most people with healthy immune systems, the initial infection might feel like a mild flu or go completely unnoticed. But make no mistake, once you're infected, the parasite is in your brain, forming cysts that your immune system can't eliminate. You become what scientists call a chronic carrier. Here's where things get really unsettling. For years, scientists assumed that Toxoplasma was essentially harmless in humans. Sure, it causes problems for people with weakened immune systems and pregnant women, but for everyone else, no big deal, right? Wrong. Starting in the early 2000s, researchers began noticing something strange. People infected with Toxoplasma showed subtle but measurable changes in personality and behavior. Dr. Jaroslav Fleger, a biologist from Charles University in Prague, was one of the first to seriously study these effects. What he found was shocking. Infected men tended to be more introverted, suspicious, and less concerned about what others thought of them. They also showed decreased rule consciousness, meaning they were more likely to disregard social norms. Infected women showed different changes. They became more warm-hearted, outgoing, and conscientious. They were also more trusting and rule-following than their uninfected counterparts. Both men and women showed increased neuroticism and anxiety. But perhaps most alarming was this: infected individuals had significantly slower reaction times. And this wasn't just theoretical. Studies found that people infected with Toxoplasma were 2.6 times more likely to be involved in traffic accidents. Think about that. A microscopic parasite in your brain could be the reason you don't hit the brakes fast enough. But it gets even darker. Multiple studies have found correlations between Toxoplasma infection and serious mental health conditions. Infected individuals showed higher rates of schizophrenia, with some research suggesting the parasite might be one of several environmental triggers for the disease in genetically susceptible people. Other studies found links to increased impulsivity, aggression, and even suicidal behavior. One study in Denmark found that women infected with Toxoplasma were 1.5 times more likely to attempt suicide. Now, I need to be clear here. Correlation doesn't equal causation, and the research is still ongoing. Not everyone agrees on the extent of these effects, and some scientists remain skeptical. But the evidence keeps mounting that this parasite is doing something to human behavior. So how exactly does Toxoplasma manipulate the brain? Scientists have discovered several mechanisms. First, the parasite targets specific regions of the brain, particularly the amygdala, which processes fear and emotions. By forming cysts in these areas, it can physically alter brain structure. Second, Toxoplasma has been shown to increase dopamine production in infected brains. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter associated with pleasure, reward, and motivation. By flooding the brain with extra dopamine, the parasite could be influencing decision-making and risk-taking behavior, just like it does in rats. The parasite also affects the immune system's inflammatory response in the brain. This chronic, low-level inflammation could contribute to changes in mood and cognition over time. Perhaps most cunningly, Toxoplasma produces an enzyme that can manipulate the neurotransmitter GABA, which regulates anxiety and fear responses. By tweaking GABA levels, the parasite might literally be turning down the brain's fear circuits. In rats, we know this manifests as attraction to cat urine. In humans, it might manifest as increased risk-taking, reduced fear of consequences, or altered social behaviors. When you step back and look at the big picture, the implications are staggering. We're talking about billions of infected people worldwide, each potentially experiencing subtle behavioral changes. Some researchers have even speculated about cultural implications. Could regions with higher Toxoplasma infection rates show different cultural characteristics? Some studies have found correlations between infection rates and factors like entrepreneurship and neuroticism at the country level. But this research is highly controversial and far from conclusive. What's not controversial is that Toxoplasma represents a fundamental challenge to the idea of free will. If a parasite can influence your personality, your fears, your reaction times, and your decisions, how much of you is really you? And here's another disturbing thought. Toxoplasma might not be alone. Scientists are discovering more and more examples of parasites and microorganisms that influence animal behavior, including in humans. Our gut bacteria, for instance, have been linked to mood, anxiety, and even food cravings. We like to think of ourselves as autonomous individuals, captains of our own ships. But the more we learn about the microscopic passengers we carry, the more we realize we might be more like ships steered by committee. So, did you know that a brain parasite might be influencing your personality right now? If you own a cat, garden regularly, or enjoy a medium-rare steak, there's a decent chance you're one of the billions of people infected with Toxoplasma gondii. Should you panic? Probably not. For most people, the effects are subtle, and the infection doesn't cause any obvious symptoms. You can reduce your risk by cooking meat thoroughly, washing vegetables, wearing gloves while gardening, and being careful when cleaning litter boxes. Or better yet, delegating that job to someone else who isn't pregnant. But the next time you take an unexpected risk, feel unusually anxious, or find yourself attracted to something you normally wouldn't be, you might want to wonder, is that really me, or is it my passenger upstairs pulling the strings? The zombie apocalypse isn't coming. It's already here. It's just a lot smaller and a lot weirder than Hollywood imagined. Thanks for watching, and remember, stay curious, stay skeptical, and maybe, just maybe, stay away from that litter box.